Hi, Sharon.
Good morning.
Well, maybe I can kick this off. And Laurel, thanks for the introduction. And thank all of you for joining us today for our inaugural webinar and giving Sharon and I the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about WTI. So since this is our first one, it thought it might make sense to just say a little bit about kind of how this whole thing started and how we got going to where we are today. And so, one way to do that is give it a little bit of history, perhaps even predating WTI. So as Laurel mentioned, I started a company called In Touch Health back in 2003, which was a telehealth company, which is the technology by which WTI rides on. And In Touch Health was a for-profit company. And actually, as we were maturing and building out the technology, we ended up with basically a worldwide telehealth cloud, which was able to deliver healthcare via telehealth anywhere in the world there's internet. In Touch Health is a for-profit company, and so we had to sell our technology. But clearly, the big beneficiaries of telemedicine are really the people who can't even pay for it. And so in 2017, I had the opportunity to meet Sharon Allen, who's also very interested in this global health area and wanted to make an impact with the next phase of her career. So in 2017, we went to the board of directors of In Touch Health and pitched them on the idea of a nonprofit, which got free access to technology, would use the goodwill and philanthropy of volunteer clinicians to deliver care to the most under-resourced areas of the world. And so that was how WTI started. That was in 2017. And so it's been 7 fabulous years. And actually, we've just learned so many things. Sharon and I have it's unbelievable how much we've learned. But just to highlight a few of the key learnings, one is just a validation that there's a huge need out there. And I think that WTI has enormous opportunity to do good. The second thing is that the huge need is global. Neither one of those are surprises. The third thing, which is a little more surprising, is that we had no idea how much clinicians would want to engage for free and volunteer their time to help those less privileged than themselves. It's actually been a wonderful thing kind of watching the best of humanity. And the last thing, before I pass it to Sharon, is that there's what we've learned. Global health is not new. Trying to help the underserved is not new. But WTI is doing 2 new things. One is we're using telehealth because that really overcomes the distance barrier, which is huge when you're trying to serve these under-resourced areas. And the second thing we're doing is we're building a platform, a matching platform. You can call it like an Uber or a Match.com, where we're actually able to bring these volunteers together with communities that they serve in a more automated way. And we think that by these 2 innovations, we can truly change global healthcare. So Sharon, I know I've talked a long time, as you're a little bit concerned that I might do, but let me just pass it to you for other learnings.
Sure. And as we both know, there's so many learnings. One of the things that I find amazing is how often our clinicians remark about the bilateral learning goes on. So when we started, we call our, volunteer experts supporting providers. But time and time again, these clinicians will say, oh my gosh, I'm learning so much from my colleagues. And I'm so amazed at what they can do with really so little. And so that's been fascinating to watch. The other thing that...
Do you have any examples of that? Or because I think that's really interesting.
Definitely. I mean, all the time. For example, in Kenya, they improvise because they have to. So, a high-end, breathing apparatus for neonates that we would have in the U.S. hospitals isn't available there or is cost prohibitive. So they jerry-rig a system with a plastic water bottle and some water and tubes going through, and it works. And so it isn't the same, but there again, just their innovations that they're using are really quite, impressive. But another thing that we also have seen is not only the collaboration with both sides of the telehealth exchange, but the collaboration among our supporting providers. Yulun, you're familiar with this story, that little baby in Bangladesh that came in. She was an orphan, and her caretaker brought her in with hugely edematous legs, and she couldn't crawl. And so Bangladesh originally asked for a dermatologist, and we had a dermatologist expert came in, and he said, "This isn't me, but I would recommend an infectious disease expert." And so one of them beamed in, and they said, "Wow, this looks like the, kind of rare Milroy's disease. Do you have other infectious disease experts that I can collaborate with?" And of course we do within our network. So we brought them together, and just the way they learn from each other. And I was privy to be on this thread, and they were saying it could be Graves, and sharing reading, and then really drilling down to what would be the best option for this orphan baby girl, and which resulted in a lymphatic massage and compression therapy training to the providers in Bangladesh, which they will not only use for this baby girl, but for their patients with malaria and whatnot. So just, bringing clinicians together for the greater good has just been incredibly inspirational, and wonderful to see.
In that last story, it sounds like it really hits on the upskilling nature of what we do.
That's exactly right. All of this is really a knowledge exchange and skills exchange, and sharing of this expertise that those that are in our network have taken years and years to acquire. So this is the best of it. They simply share it with their colleagues, and and it lives on. So yeah, absolutely. The other thing, the learning that is a good takeaway is around cultural sensitivity. Really what we're doing is bridging cultures via telehealth. And so an example of that is in Kenya, and I hope some of the providers on the call today, have had an opportunity to engage there. It's one of our busiest programs. And, when I was there, we were talking about sometimes from our supporting providers, we've heard, they were 10 minutes late. And so, or I waited 15 minutes and they weren't there. So I had to leave, which is completely understandable. I get that, we have our calendars. And so I was sharing this with our partners in Kenya, and they said, "Oh, that's interesting, because we know when we have a training at 8 a.m., we hustle to get there, and this is so important to us. And that one day the bridge was washed out, and so I had to get a friend to, hop on the back of the boda boda, and it was muddy, and so he couldn't go all the way up to the hospital. So I had to walk." I mean, the lengths that they go to, and we just, often forget how challenging the the settings are there. I'm pulling up a picture of Kenya, and with that, I mean, the lower left side is a room packed of providers engaging in with a telehealth lecture. And so they want and are so excited to have this expertise available. And we just have to all remember that it's not exactly the same. Another picture that points that out is lower right is a new hospital they're building, and of course it's been delayed. And if you can see the photo of this ladder here, that's just a reminder that they had to build the ladder that they used to build this hospital. The scaffolding for this 3-story building is all handmade out of the local forest trees that they, so life is different there. And, that's part of the joy of really this cultural exchange. So that's been very interesting. Also, just quickly, another thing about Kenya is how we're refining our hub and spoke model there. We started with a large referral hospital, and then we've gone out to some more regional sites. The photo in the middle is Sister Immaculate Judy, who runs St. Clair's Hospital. And they, through this incredible celebration, singing and dancing. There's no dancing photos in there. Those were a bit shameful, but just, amazing. So, Yulun, do you want to talk about one of our other programs, Rwanda, or?
I would love to. And I think that, just to add to what you were just talking about in terms of the cultural, I forgot what you call it, cultural humility.
Sensitivity.
Yeah, sensitivity. And that's been such a learning thing for me, because I've had the opportunity to travel to, for example, Rwanda. And Rwanda, as I've learned, so they had a genocide in 1993 where 1 million people were killed in 100 days. And so that was 30 years ago. So not very long ago. And Sharon and I had the opportunity to go there last October, I think it was, for the opening of a brand new state-of-the-art surgical training center. And the reason we were invited was because of the gentleman who's a French surgeon named Jacques Maresco, who started this whole chain of surgical training centers, invited us. And then also, as part of that invitation, the president of Rwanda, President Paul Kagame, was part of that opening as well. And it was actually really fun to be able to participate in the celebration of the opening of the training center. But the reason they wanted us involved too is, the training center is a physical location. There's a whole country of Rwanda, and then there's the whole continent of Africa. And so being able to use WTI to amplify the capabilities of like this training center in Kigali, Rwanda, across Rwanda and Africa is super, super exciting for us. And so I know you were there again more recently, Sharon, and maybe you can share some of the other stuff about Rwanda and other places.
Sure. And as is typical, we started with IRCAD Africa, but then in a hub and spoke model, we're now looking at regional sites. And on the last visit, we discussed kind of concentrating on women's healthcare. So there's a lot of transfers that are done from these regional sites to the referral hospital. And maybe a hemorrhaging woman is told to, try to get there, and a relative takes her, and it's a not optimal outcome. So now we're setting up a system at the referral hospital where they can beam in and assess the situation and, suggest what to do to stabilize that woman, either keep her there and treat her or stabilize her before a transfer is done. So lots of, amazing thing. And then a breast oncology surgeon is super excited about being able to assess. There's virtually no breast cancer screening there. And so she's excited to be able to implement that. And that is part of what we're doing is POCUS training. There's a little kit here that we give them with a butterfly ultrasound. And we're teaching our partners in these low resource areas how to use that for a much broader range of diagnostics than they use it now. So, and one of those is screening for breast cancer.
And POCUS is point of care ultrasound, right?
Exactly. So very excited. Oh, one of the things that POCUS training includes is lungs and how to assess what's going on and diagnose pneumonia which it is one of the major causes of children under 5. In fact, when I was there visiting the Minister of Health, his colleague couldn't be there because his son had just passed away from pneumonia. So the need is amazing. It's huge, and the fact that we can address it is amazing. So that's just a bit about Rwanda.
You might point out in that picture there, because I was looking at it while you had it up. I mean, the lower left, the taller gentleman, second to the left, is the president. That's President Paul Kagame of Rwanda. And then to the left of him, the person on the furthest left is Professor Jacques Maresco, who's the surgeon who did the first transatlantic surgery back in 2001. And they're actually, you can tell they're looking at the device that WTI places there as they're talking about how they're going to use telemedicine to, again, amplify what's going on in that surgical training center out into the surrounding areas.
I know we're getting close to time, but Yulun, we traveled to Ukraine, and that is certainly different than our usual work. But do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was quite something. That was, let's see, we're in 2024. That was early 2023, I think is when it was. And we were invited to by the Ministry of Health, because WTI had already been working with Ukraine. And actually, Ukraine was our first set of programs in conflict zones, as opposed to under resource zones like Rwanda and some of the other African or Southeast Asian countries. And the Ukraine scenario was actually where the Ministry of Health was starting to think past the conflict, which unfortunately we haven't gotten there yet, but they wanted to think about how to use telemedicine in general to rebuild the country. And so Sharon and I had the opportunity to go to Kyiv. And so we landed in Warsaw, and then 2 separate trains in 19 hours of travel, we end up in Kyiv. And so we're set up for a conference for, I think it was a day and a half, with a lot of the military clinical leaders of the country. And we're setting up for that meeting. And one of the things that I remember well was a missile siren. And the missile siren goes off. And it's like Sharon and I look at each other, what's going on? People are looking at their phones, their smartphones. And as it turns out, there's an app telling them where the missile's going. So they look and they go to us, oh, we're okay, and missile's going somewhere else, so let's keep going. But that was one of my memories. I'm sure you have others.
Definitely. Yeah, there was no power in the hotel. And when we walked in, the person behind the desk had a little light, and you have to wander over there to check in. And there was no heat in the general hotel, and there was just a heater in the rooms. And yeah, it was quite an experience going to a battle zone. I was originally supposed to go with this contingent of ex-military medics that were going to present at the conference we were holding. And then they couldn't get a security clearance from the US. And so we went unescorted. But I just returned from there a week or so ago. We actually met in Poland this time, because those same military providers, they have been helping Ukraine from the outset. So Ukraine, when we first partnered with them, we said, how can we help you? What are your largest needs? And they said, combat trauma care. They have great trauma surgeons, but combat trauma is very different. So that's how we started. We have great relationships. We amassed a huge contingent from the US and elsewhere to help the Ukrainians. And then this last trip to Poland was with our Ukrainian counterparts, and they're doing a study on battlefield telemedicine and the learnings, which are very different. We had to figure out how to mask the signal so the Russian drones wouldn't make it a target, all sorts of things. but we could talk all day about, our programs and the amazing work that you as providers are enabling. And just like to mention that we couldn't do any of this, of course, without you, the medical experts. So thank you. And I will turn it over to Laurel.